Okay, the recording has begun.
Baruch atah Yahuwah Eloheinu Zaba'ot Melech HaOlam. Thank you for all your barakah. We praise you. We hold you in high regard. Through our Kohen Hagadol, Yehusha HaMashiach Ruach HaKodesh Olam Ba'ad. Bashab Yehusha HaMashiach Aman.
Thank you. So we've just done 22 hours of looking at Ezekiel, ending in Ezekiel 43 verses 10 through 12 last week. And just to readdress that, the significant word there is Tav Kaf Nun Tav, or a derivative Tav Kaf Vav Nun Tav, Takanot, where it's regarding, it says in verse 11, so that they may safeguard its entire form and all its rules and fulfill them. And that word for rules is het kuf. Well, the word het kuf, chok, a derivative is het vav kuf. Derivatives is basically variations of the spelling. You know, you stick yods and vavs in between the other consonants, and it's a rung on a ladder. So what's the significance of what is called law? You know, people say the 10 commandments. Oh, there's 10 laws, 10 commandments, but it doesn't say that. It says ayin shin resh, which is the word for 10, the number, but ayin shin resh also means to enrich or to be made wealthy. And the word debar, debarim is the plural. Debar literally is usually translated as word or speech or matter, meaning a subject matter, some occupation of your interest. So in Isaiah 58, where it talks about on the day of Yom Kippur to humble yourself, that word humble, ayin nun hey, doesn't technically mean fast. Fast is zadi mem. I believe it's zadi mem. Anyway, the point is it's not ayin nun hey. Ayin nun hey can mean that you fast, but ayin nun hey means to answer or to sing. And if you are singing and you have the setup where you've got one lead singer and then you've got a group, sometimes there's 3 other people, backup singers, you might call them, or you'll have the soloist and the choir singing a response to what the main voice is projecting. That choir response, or those backup singers, are the ayin nun hey. Very similar to the word ayin dalet, where you could say forever and ever, you betcha, and how, to eternity and beyond, or infinity. You know, it's like, what? How can you get beyond the ultimate? Well, that's ayin dalet. Ayin dalet is witness or testimony or testifier. So legally, a man's word doesn't stand on its own, but he certainly gives his word. And then you're supposed to have 2 or more witnesses. Well, those 2 witnesses standing beside the man. In fact, here's this shirt that I showed you the other day. You got the Vav, that's number 6, that's the man, and these 2 witnesses, which are Hays. And the Yod above the Vav, interesting, the Yod is number 10, and a tithe is 1/10. You can say, well, that's the top. Is that like the hat of the man, the helmet of the man, the head of the man? And there's a Dalet, Yod Hey Vav Dalet Hey is the word for Yehuda, but Hey Vav Dalet Hod is the word to give praise and glory, thanks, confession of sin, reverberating, echoing, resounding, projecting like ripples out across the expanse. So Pete here made this Alef and Tav, blue, purple, red, the colors of the embroidery, and Shema, Shomer, and Asa, which is hear, guard, protect, keep, observe, and do it. Don't just turn it into a relic. Don't turn it into a sacred object. that you stick on the shelf engage the action. What did Yahuwah say? To get this in our mind, you go back here to Ezekiel 43 and it says, safeguard. Well, right before that, write this down before their eyes. Before their eyes. It's like, let them watch you doing it. The idea of eyes in Hebrew, ayin, yod, nun, ayin, and typically it'll say ayini. Well, you'd say, well, it would have to be yod mem to be plural, ayinim, but it's typically written ayini, ayin, yod, nun, yod. Well, the yod suffix makes it personal, my own. So it's not really eyes, plural. But if you look up in the dictionary, ayin is a really interesting word in that, well, it's eyeball, and in paleo, it's drawn sometimes just as a circle, sometimes a circle with a dot. I draw it as elliptical with a tag coming back further than the connector, which was one of the ancient forms of writing it, but on purpose doing that so that it looks like a fruit. So that's the stem. You pull a pear or an apple off the tree, and cherry, typically there's this little stem still attached. That looks like that. And so the seed in the middle of the fruit, like the dot in the middle of the eye. So sometimes the eye is drawn just as a zero, a circle. I put the dot in there because he says that if we listen to his voice, guard what he said and do what he said, we are what's called the apple of his eye, the pupil of his eye. And it's like the word zippur that we talked about, word for birdie or morning song bird. It's the most precious part, your greatest treasure. So to lose an eye that's pretty significant. You know, there's a verse where we'll get into this later, talking about this book of the various shields. Anyway, there's this one particular place, one of the shields. This one here, we'll talk about this later, but the last phrase written in here is, he listens, Yahuwah, to the sound of your words. Now, why does it say that? And that would be Deuteronomy 1, I think it's verse, maybe it's 39. Boy, it's written so small, it's hard to read. Anyway, the point is, the couple verses that are written on this shield right before that, it says, the halakha, or the mode of, or the how you walk, according to your face is what it says, your attitude, contrary to the way, the path as instructed, your guidance taught to you specifically in order to stand stabilized at the place of your encampment, protected and pampered with fire at night, and seeing you on the path that walking with clouds every day. And then the next word, he listens, Yahweh, to the sound of your words. So basically, this section in Deuteronomy, which is written on this particular shield pattern. Well, here, let me just read the whole context here, just so you'll understand why it's on this. And I'm just giving my translation of this particular passage, Deuteronomy 1, verses 29 through, gosh, just can't read it, 39 or 36 or something here. Then say to them, I'll make this available, I'll talk about that later on. Say to them, do not tremble, do not be frightened or stand in awe. Do not give regard of esteem or admiration. Do not let your own composure be eroded. That's all the word lo ayin resh zadi vav nun. Don't let your own composure be eroded. Whatever you see of the enemy, the adversary, even if it's some physical malady, do not let it wear away at your, you might say, your internal integrity of your regard of Yahuwah. Do not fear them. That's the word Yod Resh Alef Vav Nun. Do not fear them. Do not revere them or honor their intimidation. The next verse, Yahuwah your El Hekam, and I say that because if it's personal, Aleph Lamed El He Hey Yod, Yod again, Yod suffix, my own personal possession. If it's Elohim, it would be Yod Mem suffix, but that's the plurality, not that there's numerous deities, but it's called the royal we, which is to say, if the king refers to himself, it's like I've heard it said, if the king goes out and orders breakfast, oh, we will have bacon and eggs and potatoes, whatever the king's eating. We will have who in the mouse in your pocket, or he speaks to himself in the plural. And so some people say, why is the word Elohim in the plural used in Genesis 1? Let us make man in our image, Genesis 2. Why the plural? And some people have ran with that to say, oh, well, there's this multiplicity, numerous of them, or numerous regards of them, or perhaps it's the royal we. Was it the Father talking to his Son before the incarnation? Not the flower in his pocket, the carnation, but the incarnate is the put on, like carne asada in Spanish is the meat barbecued. So carne is like where we get the word carnivorous, which is put into the flesh. So John 1:1, in the beginning was the Word. What word? Well, the Word is with Elohim, and the Word is Elohim. I was talking to somebody earlier this week, and they're saying, the riddle, what is that word? And they're saying, the word is God. The Word is God. No, Elohim is the one who made the Word. And but they're looking right at these words, and their mind couldn't get past that. Pentecostal. And the interesting thing about that is, even though they're good Christian Pentecostal believers, what you keep hearing constantly in songs and in preaching and in reading and the translations, what you keep hearing, it's reinforced, and it pretty well locks it in. And you try to get somebody to think, as it were, outside the box, and it can be very difficult. Now, that's a good thing if you're holding on to the truth. So keep that reinforced. But what if it's wrong? You say, how can it be wrong? We got 2,000 years of good Christian popes, preachers, prophets, professors, theologians. Why did they change the Sabbath day from the 7th to the 1st on purpose? And why do they insist and retain it? And why do they reject the Moedim? Not just because they don't know, but why do they intentionally reject the Moedim? We'll get to that a little bit here, of Leviticus 23, and hold on to the sacred holy days of, well, the American culture, which is the Roman, British, I think, or just call it American, Christmas, Easter, Halloween, the big three, and then various other ones scattered about. But the idea is, well, you're holding on to it and you call them sacred. I mean, when the Halloween is the All Saints Day, is what it used to be called. So that's a holy relic. But why hold on to those? Well, because they are so meaningful. I said, no, wait a minute. Yahuwah said, do not. He said to his people Israel, do not copy the ritual ceremonies of your enemies, the heathen, call them infidel. Pagan is actually a religion, so they weren't necessarily pagan. They might have been pagan, but it's Elohim Achrim, different deity. Do not copy or imitate their rituals, ceremonies of worship, and do it like you're doing it to me. Don't do that. And he gave us very specifically the Moedim in Leviticus 23, and it's found elsewhere, but he said these are Moedi, and that'll be in one of these shields. Moedi, again, there's no plural. It's translated set apart or consecrated, kadosh, mikra kodesh, set apart assemblies, plural, festivals, feasts. It's not in the plural. It ends in a yod. It's his personal possession. Why? And the word moedi has that ayin dalet right in the middle, which means these moedim testify. They're the witnesses pointing to him. They're the two hays next to the vav, as it were, in yod hey vav hey, corroborating his identity, his mind, his being, his ruach. If we were serious about Yahweh is my Elohim, Yahweh El-He, ending it with the yod, personal, I could say, I'm going to worship him as an expression of my own heart, and I'm going to do it however I want. Well, go ahead. But he also gave us, and you could call it the corporate regard, corporate meaning the called assembly, because the word kra, kufresh aleph, not only means to learn how to read, but it means to call or to summon or to convoke, a convocation, which is to invoke or send out summons for people to come to a gathering. And that is on Shabbat as well as the 7 Moedim. So the word mikra kodesh is mem prefix, means the time, the place, the object of kufresh aleph, the object of mikra, the object of the summoning gathering, kodesh, which would be technically translated sacred, holy. It's the word kadosh. Okay, so if these in Leviticus 23 are the sacred assemblies, the kadosh, mem, vav, ayin dalet, yod. So ayin dalet's the operative word. So these moedim, very specifically, are his personal. He invented them, he designated them, he designed them. So if we have his ruach, or as the Christian church, we're led by the Spirit tells me, fills me, and inclines me towards worship and towards praise and adoration and affinity, heartfelt connection. Why do they reject his moedim? Why isn't the Holy Spirit leading, connecting them through the authorized moedim? Well, somebody said, which Constantine reaffirmed with a royal edict, a law from the Roman Emperor, him being the emperor, 325 AD, I believe, we will have nothing more to do with the detestable practices of the Jews, including the Shabbat, the Moedim, made it illegal. If you try to keep them, you'd lose your possessions, tortured, killed, your family ravaged. And then the Jews also, just so you know, the Jews, even today, there's this thing called the Noahide laws. And if you don't know about them, I believe there might be 7, there might be 10, but I believe there's 7. And a few years back, they had, I think it was Bush the first, George the first. Might have been W, but anyway, the point is, signed into law that the United States government is fully backing these Noahide laws, and at any time they could implement them. And one of them, I believe, says that if you're a filthy animal, bestial, goyim, Gentile, you cannot keep the Shabbat. It's a crime worthy of death. So anybody who's not Jewish, according to certain standards of that definition, you can be, let's just say, ruined. Why would they do that? Wouldn't the Jews want everybody to come to the covenant, the eternal covenant? No, if that mind, those people of that mind think of themselves as so set apart that nobody else is fit, then nobody else is allowed to copy their stuff. And any non-Jew, hence by definition, goy, nation, other nation, Gentile is the way it's translated, any of them, just so you know what we're messing with here, any non-Jew tries or intends to pretend to keep, pantomime, act out keeping the Shabbat or the Moedim, it's a death sentence. And maybe be hurt quite a bit before that moment of the death. Why would they do that? Well, that's on the books, internationally, not just in the United States. Pretty rotten stuff. So here's the point. I don't claim to be copying Jewish stuff. I'm reading Yahuwah's words for the 12 tribes of Israel, and regardless of lineage or family name or any connection that I could say, yeah, but it's connected back there somewhere. It's like, hey, I've my heart, by my ayin of understanding, determined to be his people. Therefore, he said there's one Torah for the native born as well as the proselyte, the sojourner, the hanger-on, if you would. So according to my understanding, it's absolutely legitimate in his eyes of law to grab a hold. The interesting word to grab a hold is kuf chet, which is the opposite of chet kuf. Chet vav kuf, the rung on the ladder, you better grab a hold. So it's the opposite spelling of the word. If the rung of the ladder is the same as the word translated law, or sometimes ordinance, or sometimes custom, or sometimes commanded, the protocols absolutely insisted upon, chet kuf. And so to say with that same attitude, grab hold of it and absolutely insist upon is kuf chet, translated take hold. Well, that's what we're doing. And whether some other recognized authority wearing fancy robes, ordained by wearing certain hats, ordained by this group or that college or this other ecclesiastical type of authority who says, yes, you could be our minister, or we'll put our letters after your name and authorize you. It has nothing to do with any of that stuff. Pretty renegade to do this. Just so you know, anybody messing with this stuff is not asking for trouble, but be aware that we're surrounded by trouble. But this verse, do not tremble, do not be frightened or stand in awe, do not give regard of esteem or admiration, like, wow, look at their weapons. Oh, look how big, ooh, look how fancy, look how stern their face, look how, look at the toys that they torment people with. It goes on to say, Yahweh your El Hekam, and again, what I started to say, if it ends in a Yod mem, that's the plural. If it ends in a Yod, that's personal singular. But here it ends with a Kaf mem. Well, if it ends with a Kaf, El Heka, Kaf, the open hand, that means you or yours. And if it's Kaf mem, it's the you plural, as in Yal. Yahweh is Yal's Elohim. It says your brilliant radiance for you to face with regard. In other words, if you're looking at these monsters, it's like, no, look at Yahweh. Doesn't matter what they look like. Yeah, they're big, they're scary, they're intimidating, but so there's this, this verse is basically saying that our struggle, our effort is to keep our mind's eye on Yahuwah, though our physical eye can see these guys and hear their threats, keep it on Yahuwah. So this is our daily dynamic struggle, is to keep our mind's eye on Yahuwah, because the word ayin, not just eyeball, drawn like a fruit with a seed, so that whatever you do is going to come back. It's like planting a crop of future harvest, which is the reason for drawing it like that. But the word ayin also means to weigh carefully, balance exactly, determine with critical scrutiny, meticulously. And then there's this other word that means punctilious or pedantic, which is strictly minute detail. There's a word kuf dalet, and you could picture the kuf is the back of the head. So if your head is tipped down like you're focusing your attention, and a dalet, like this triangle here, pointed down like a tip of a pen, or you might say a microscopic focus. if you're putting your face down and looking at something, the top of your head is what's seen. So Kuf Dalet could literally means to drill. So if you have a drill motor and you're balancing your weight so you don't break the drill bit, but you're putting pressure straight down on top of it, and all this force of you, your intent, the drill motor, the drill bit, going down just into one little hole. Picture all that energy driving down to the focal point. Well, that's what Kuf Dalet means. So I'm just trying to show that within the spelling of the words, if you notice the pictures, the pictographs of the letters, and picture what the definitions are saying, the various different aspects or very different things that like Klein's dictionary mentions for the various different, sometimes you'll have half a dozen or a dozen different meanings of the words, pool them all together and you can get this image of, in the word Sinai means erudite scholarship. Mount Sinai, where the 10 Commandments were, the Yashar Devarim were spoken and then written. The word Sinai means erudite scholarship. Well, what's that? That means intensive study where you're focusing. And there's a word, it's in one of these other shields. I can't remember the word off the top of my head, but it means, it's Resh Chet Mem is Racham. Well, Chet Mem is warm. Resh Chet Mem means womb, W-O-M-B, a place where a baby incubates within his mother, but it also is translated, one of the dictionary means is lover of scholars. So this one particular verse uses Resh Chet Vav Mem, speaking of Yahuwah having, it's in, I think it's Exodus 30, where Yahweh speaks his name and gives his attributes to be known for. And one of them is Rachom, a lover of scholars. I mean, he didn't just say, I love everybody. All humans are the children of God. Well, how do you define those words? I mean, people say that we're all God's children. Well, Yahweh says Israel is his firstborn. And Yahweh also refers to Israel as his daughter and as his wife, his betrothed, his servant. But Yahusha said of some people, your father's the devil. Are we all God's children? Well, who's God? Well, see, I can't even put my mind, I don't want to put my mind into that framework, that paradigm, give definition to what does it mean to be God and what does God's children mean? And then if that's all inclusive, where's the exclusion? Because there has to be exclusion if even Yahusha would say your father's the devil. But then what about these people who don't have a regard of Yahuwah? Are they classified as Yahuwah's children? And if he says that Israel is his children, my B'nai Israel is children of Israel, or my son Israel, B'nai, again, it's not plural, Benim. See, I could sit here and try to say, well, how do I find my bearings? That's also a definition of a certain word. I can't remember off the top of my head, but when you come across it in the dictionary, how to find one's bearings, that's like, what does all this mean? Where am I? Who am I? How do I fit into this? So instead of necessarily trying to locate all the possible places to be, what people say this, and what does that mean, and how do I, better that I read Yahuwah's words and say, how do I find my bearings on this reference, this verse, this place of reading? So for him to say, don't worry about all those other Elohim, all those other voices that you hear in the news, or Yahweh your Elehekam, y'all's brilliant radiance for your face, for you to face with regard. He is the one whose attention you walk in. So it's like, yeah, this beast has his eye on me, this monster, this AI camera is watching every move and tracking my phone. It's like, I got to remember, his eye is on me. So my eyes got to be on him. He will war for you. That word war is lachem, lamed chet mem. Well, chet mem is the word for warmth. Lamed chet is the word for jawbone or vigorous and juicy. But lechem is the word for bread, like Bethlehem is house of bread, translated or transliterated Bethlehem. But lechem is also war, battle. So it's hot vitality. Well, if it's describing exact words, what does this mean? He's your war, he will war for you, he's your bread. Anxiously can't wait. So we were reading that one verse that I mentioned in Ezekiel 20, I think it was verse 38, where he said, I could hardly wait to just, he said, those people, the marauders. See, in English, we have this word M-A-R-A-U-D-E-R, marauder. There's a school around here, and that's the symbol of their, what do you call it? Their logo, their icon is some guy like a pirate. By the way, this isn't necessarily a pirate outfit. Yeah, back in those days, they wore three-corner hats, but everybody, it's like wearing a baseball hat or something. They all wore three-cornered hats, which is just a round hat with the sides folded up, but it's not a pirate hat per se. My point is, marauders are like these rebellious, tough guys, just go out and break things like pirates. But the word mem resh dalet is pronounced marad, and that's a word in Hebrew that means rebellious and criminal, trespassers. Why would you want that as your logo? The icon of the esteem that your inner heart looks for guidance. Marauders, yeah, hey. It's like, wait a minute, you guys are going to burn in hell. Did you remember that part of the story? We're supposed to be kadoshim elyonin, saints of the Most High, righteous ones. It's like, how many of these things creep into our subconscious, whether it's blatant or overt consciousness, but certainly subconsciously misorienting, misdirecting, bringing us to ruin, because the promise that Yahuwah gave his people is, you keep your eye on me and my eyes on you. There's this reciprocality, and you better you better listen to my voice and guard what I say, because everybody's going to try to get you distracted, and you better do what I say. So the last words of Moshe's out of his mouth before he died, his very last words, you'll find it in the end of Deuteronomy. He said, who is like you, Israel? Get a clue. Who? No other nation, no other people in the face of the earth ever was, ever will be like you. Yahuwah is your Elohim. All your enemies have against you is one weapon. They're going to lie to you. They're going to try to deceive you and get you to think that Yahweh is deceiving you, that he's the trickster. They're going to try to get you to throw away his words, his promises, his perspective of reality. They're going to get you to doubt him. And that then is the entire challenge of this life, is to say, what did Yahweh say? What does he mean, and how do I do it? And so even though there's been 2,000 years of the bastion of Christianity, the light on the hill, the city of illuminated, throw away his day, throw away his commandments, throw away his moedim, call him a different name, and hey, we'll make it all about going to heaven instead of walking in the ways of righteousness on earth. That's not Yahweh, the Elohim of Israel. Well, then who is it? Who the hell is that? Who, if I follow a different Elohim, will I end up in hell? How is it different? I have to be able to recognize the distinction of differentness and say, is what I'm hearing Yahweh my Elohim, or is it somebody else? Is it a different voice? How do I recognize his voice? In Jeremiah 31, he said, I will put my Ruach HaKodesh in you, and he will make it so that you want to walk in my ways. You want to. You're craving and desiring, what are his ways? I want to do them. Well, so as we were talking last week at the tail end, the idea was the Ruach of Elohim mirachefeted al pemei tahom, Genesis 1, verse 2. And that word merachefet is translated hovered or fluttered. It's oscillating, it's vibrating. It's what's vibrating? And while the word ruach is expanse. What expanse? There's no expanse yet. There's nothing exists yet. Well, that word exists. The word of John 1:1. Hebrew Alef Bet, imagine the expanse between Alef and Tav is determined to be 22 letters. How do you wiggle that? How do you vibrate that? If you, sorry, somebody's saying something here. The concept of string theory in quantum physics, we've talked about this before, just to mention it briefly. We got elements here, air, water, metal, wood, rock, flesh. It's all composed of elements. There's 100 and something elements. I forget the number. Elements are made out of electrons and protons. And from what I understand, you got this nucleus of an atom and the electrons are swarming around it. So it's a spatial distinction, that which is a core in the center and that which is kind of used, I think of it as solid unmoving, kind of like the heliocentric model, sun in the center and the planets around, or the solar system model. If it's true, that's just a model. But the point is, you got the stable center, and then juxtaposed with opposite characteristics, you've got this moving electron field around it. So the distinction of two different things, whether you call one a positive charge and the other one a negative charge, it's not necessarily positive, negative, but it's like if you have a sine wave and you've got an up and a down, you've got the crest, and then you've got the trajectory in between in whatever aspect or form. It's like, what makes it do that? Now, some physicists might know why something takes a wave action. But I mentioned once before, I tried to find on the internet, look through all these encyclopedias and stuff, and I couldn't find anybody. They say, we know that sound in the air moves, we know that water ripples on the ground moves, and that light moves. And they say, well, what makes water ripples? Well, you got pressure from the compaction of the water molecules and the air pressure, and so that pushes the wave action up. It's like they're guessing. If there's no pressure, why would a light wave oscillate in the middle of the vacuum of space? What makes it turn direction? Well, if you take a string and you start wiggling it, this isn't exactly a string, but for it to take this shape, that's the meaning of the word merachefet. Flutter, vibrate, funicular, to well, that's why things oscillate then, because back there in Genesis 1, verse 2, the Ruach of Elohim started doing that action. And so everything has that action, even now, persisting. What if it was a different action? Because if you have some computer that generates a square wave instead of a round wave or a zigzag wave, you get these crazy meaning erratic noises generated. And they could do stuff with computers, come up with all kinds of different noises based on messing with that wave. And how close or how tall the wave action is, what we would call frequency, which changes pitch. And it gets into the cymatics, which gets into the geometric shapes. We talked about this a little bit last week, and I'm trying to bring the focus in of saying why. Is because if the Ruach of Elohim is this alphabet, how can that be the alphabet? How can the Holy Spirit be the Hebrew alphabet? Because the word Ruach is not just spirit. That's just one English word to translate, but it also means mind, in the Klein's dictionary, mind, will, disposition, attitude, occupation, that which catches your attention, like the word ayin nun hey, anah, like the word, hey, what are you facing? Pei nun yod, panei. It's translated countenance, or that which is before you. And you see all these different Hebrew words, which is what you attend to. And that word chok that we had mentioned, that means law or command, it also means imitate. So when he gave us 10 instructions, commands, if there are 10 chok or various other chok, dabar are matters, but they're matters for our attention. They're matters for us to respond with intention by hearing, then guarding. Hey, protect that, keep it clean, and remove the dregs and make it as pure as we can. Hence the ancient script, the ancient language, the original language, Hebrew. Get rid of all the clutter and the distortions, getting back to that pure tone of frequency, that vibration. Well, if the mind, the will, the disposition, the attention, the occupation of all Yahweh's concerns, and the things, the moed, the witnesses that testify of his mind and heart and will, are all these moedim, these Hebrew words. And if the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet is the expanse between Aleph and Tav, it's the Ruach, because it comes from him. There was no man to invent this. It's Kadosh. So the Ruach HaKodesh is essentially this expanse of 22 letters, which he separated and gave space between, which is the other meaning of the word merachefet, is to expand, to spread out and put space between, which is to say, connect the dots with lines. And ehyeh is ehyeh, asher ehyeh, asher ehyeh is dot, line, dot, line, dot. It's like, hey, that's like the meta between the meaning of the letters. It all fits, that the Ruach of Elohim oscillating, setting up a certain frequency that he then told us, keep my commands and walk in my ways, hearing and guarding and doing the festivals, is synchronizing with his frequency exactly, which puts us cymatically in the perfect geometry as his, the resonant vibration. And just so you know, human bodies, they say we're like 80%, 90% water. If you look at what cells are composed of, we're more like about, from what I understand, like 98% water. And water not only will ripple and form these geometric patterns like salt or sand on a table, on say a piece of sheet metal, which is the whole Chladni study, but water has a memory. It's like, how can water remember stuff? That's the whole quantum entanglement thing. They found that water, if you do something to it, and then you separate it and put it in another container and do something else to it, water the plants, whatever, but you collect that water again, and somehow it still has a memory of this original vibration. And whether it gets into this thing called structured water, or isn't water just H2O? Isn't H2O H2O? Isn't it all things equal? Apparently not. And apparently, though, if you vibrate this water according to a certain vibration, like the merachefeting of the Ruach in Genesis 1:2, it's got that memory. And even though it's gotten distorted, even though we learned pagan, heathen customs, traditions, ceremonial rituals, ways of talking and praying and reading, and to come back into synchronicity, harmony, sympathetic vibration with that actual Ruach, the water itself, the molecules, whoa, it's bad terms, but it's almost like they come back alive. They regain what they lost. And for Yahuwah to say, okay, your forefathers scrambled, distorted, convoluted, ripped it apart, amalgamated different other cultures and Elohim Achrim, and that's it. going to kill him, going to let him get taken into captivity, going to throw him like seed across the face of the earth. Ezekiel 36:23. And when they come back to the truth of making his Shem Hagadol Kadosh, making his great name pure, as it's supposed to be, then he's going to bring us back to the land. And then he's going to have us live where even the wild animals will leave us alone. You can sleep in the woods without even a concern. I'm not going to get bit by a rattlesnake or throttled by Bigfoot or attacked by a bobcat in the middle of the night or something, panther. Ain't going to happen because we're somehow in sync. And so the question is, well, how do we do that? Do we have to listen to a certain tone? Maybe 528 hertz. Yeah, the choir singing that note. It was written in a book. One guy said, it's a thought. When 144,000 people sing the Song of Moses in the solfeggio tones, or let's say the 528 frequency, boom, that's going to cause the rapture. It's kind of like the Big Bang in another sense. And boom, the earth is going to shift on its axis and everything go back to normal. When 144,000, just any 144? Well, it's got to be 12,000 of each of the tribes of Israel, 12,000 from each of the 12 tribes. And if they're singing the songs of Moses in the solfeggio scale, and it's like, now I'm not mocking him, but I'm saying, what a thought. Maybe. Well, maybe not, but maybe. But think about that. He's trying to picture the ultimate graphic as a staging of an event. When 12,000 of each of the 12 tribes gets together and sings the Song of Moses in the solfeggio scale, bam, that's got to be the pinnacle of human endeavor, human agency of being his people. Either that or just speaking his words and sitting down on Shabbat and keeping his Moedim. What I'm trying to say, I'm trying to identify what do we have to do to be his people so that when he says, hey, I'm your Elohim. Hey, you're my Elohim. Okay, Yahuwah, you invented the human eyeball. You sustain every cell of our being and our breath until the day we're gone off this planet. I know you can. I know you're Yahweh Raphi, Yahweh Rafenu, my healer, our healer. You said you have not because you asked, hey, I'm asking, would you please heal this, put this retina, glue it back to the back of the eyeball like it's supposed to be, please. I don't want to go to those men in white robes. I don't trust their, please empower them if I need to, but you can, you said you would, please. There's the request. What if a whole bunch of people request? I mean, what does it take? What's the ideal? So what I'm saying about this whole thing is that the chok, the mera chefet, the vibrating, is listening to what he said, believing it, guarding it, keeping it, and doing it. That's how we synchronize with his vibration. Well, if we're synchronized with his vibration, why does crazy stuff like this happen? Where all of a sudden your eye just decides to fall apart. Your retina just gives up the ghost and falls off out of place. And I've heard people over the years say, well, just tell it to go back. Hey, retina, you go back and glue yourself to that. Be glued. B'Shem Yahweh. Be glued back in position so that you function properly. I tell you to, by my authority that he gave me over my own body. Dang, not yet. Doesn't mean it won't, just means not yet. Well, for him to say he will war for us, he's our bread, it's like we're supposed to be feeding on him and he'll take care of the bad guys, the monsters, the misalignments. I believe that. Then it goes on to say, just like everything he did for you against Egypt, for your eyes to comprehend, which is weigh, measure, balance, and determine for yourself. Everything he did, the 10 plagues, the Sea of Reeds, drowning Pharaoh's army, all that, he said, hey, I'll keep doing the same stuff. Same stuff. You don't even have to worry about it. Okay. Next verse. And in the wilderness. Now, the word wilderness is bamidbar. And dabar is that word. Memdabar, place of words. Well, that's language. Bamidbar. Bet mem is bima, which is stage directing. So it's almost like in the language, stage directing, setting this whole thing up. Well, that's learning how to read the 22 letters is bamidbar, stage directing. It's almost like these 22 characters are putting on a play. Well, you dance around. Well, that's like spelling words. But what if they're in the original order sequence, the 22 in the chronology of Abagara Havaza Chataya Kalamanasa Chafatza Karashata. Oh, did you hear the song? Did you see the play, the action? What does that mean? Well, that's Bamidbar. That's the exhibition. So it says, and in the wilderness that was exhibited, that you were picked up and carried. Yahweh Elheka, like the way that a man would pick up and carry his son for the entire journey, that they walked until you arrived until this very place. In fact, this is the way it's spelled, Ayin Dalet Hamakom Hazah. Ayin Dalet means until, but it also means witness. It's a testifier. Look, the fact that this Hazah, Hey Zayin Hey, Hamakom, comb, like a rooster's comb stands up, teeth of a comb. So kumi is to arise, like kumi ori, arise and shine. But hamakom is the place of this place. Like dig a hole and stick a post in, or plant a tree. Hamakom, this place. Hamakom hazah. Look at this place. The fact you're even here is proof that he picked up and carried you, because otherwise you wouldn't be here. It's like, oh, yeah. It's like the fact that we're here listening to his words about the original language is the proof that he is restoring interest in his ways, because never in my life was it suggested or was I ever encouraged to do so. Yet here we are. Is he restoring his name? His fame, his renown, his reputation, his Shem? Is he restoring his Shem after all these years? Is he restoring the regard of his Moedim? Is he restoring his Bamidbar? And putting within us a desire, craving to walk in his ways, knowing that if we do, it's by us obeying the commands that we synchronize with his Mira Chefeting Ruach. That is the synchronicity. He gave us the commands as the means to be in harmonic vibration sympathetically with him. Exactly the same, echad. Now remember, Yahusha said, or it was told of him, he thought it not robbery to be equal with God. What? He thought it not robbery. He's not a pirate by, hey, I'm going to call myself equal. Equal is not the same thing as is. There's an equality of difference. So when people say Jesus is the Father, yeah, I disagree. How do you define terms? I can easily look and say, well, what did he give us to make this distinction? He gave us Aleph and Bet. If Aleph is, Ehyeh the dot. It is or it isn't. It's a single point of, boom, there's the dot. It exists. That's Ehyeh, Aleph Hey Yod Hey. It's all echad. There is no other. In fact, it's so echad you can't identify where it is, because it's just oneness. It's just isness. So when he says in John 1:1, this word was with Elohim, whoa, that's a distinction. That's otherness. And if you read it in Greek, it's different, but just logical wrapping your mind. The letter bat is the prefix letter on a word that means in, on, with, among, through, against, or in the condition of. So it's a description showing proximity, spatial distinction. If something is with, then there's something else already exists. It's a secondary. So bet's number 2, Aleph is number 1. So just that phrase, In the beginning was the word that was with Elohim. That means it's not Elohim, but it's alongside. But it says for it to be Elohim. Again, the English words makes it sound like it's one and the same, but there's this thing about being equal, meaning that Elohim invented, let's say, or determined, because some people don't like, oh, he didn't create this word. Oh, gosh. Try to find the exact English verb description. What did he do? Caused it to be. Then he called it his son, but see, the word son is bet nun, but bet nun hey is a construct. He built, he invented, he determined this word that he was so good with. He said, yeah, like me, with me. I'm cool with that. I'm not against it, but other people say the bet is the letter for the devil. It's contrary, or it's distinction, it's otherness, it's possible adversity or adversarialism. Otherness, achar, im. Achar is different, other, next, strange, a future alteration. Elohim achrim is don't let there be any other things different than this in the future, which are different. And so when I was reading these words in Hebrew and gods of others, I don't have any of those other people's gods, but no, they're Elohim achrim, other, different, next, strange, coming in the future, late, delayed, like a couple thousand years later. 1,500 years after Moshe, Yeshua comes up on the scene and seems to have changed everything. That's an Elohim achrim, especially if he's considered to be Elohim. And I had to face that, bam, like a train wreck of, am I worshiping an Elohim achrim unbeknownst to myself, thinking that I'm worshiping God with all my heart? Only it's not Yahuwah Zavot, it's a God of Jesus Christ. Different. How's he different? Different name, different day, different covenant, different people. Bride of Christ, no longer the 12 tribes of Israel. And it's like, dag nabbit. What do I do? I got to figure this out. Eternal life hangs in the balance. Gosh, do I want to be that guy who hears, depart from me, I never knew you? Rats. How easy is it to become one of those? The great multitude will go through the wide gate and miss the narrow gate of eternal life. Wow. He gave us these words and did these things for Israel so that it would be in our eyes to calculate, measure, weigh, balance. The word balance has to do with mishpat. It has to do with balanced scales, where this is what he said and this is what he's doing. This is what he said and somebody else doing something different. That's not balanced scales. There's something wrong. There's something wrong. Where's it wrong? Yeah, but we got Holy Spirit answering prayers and doing miracles. 5 minutes. But the Sabbath day isn't regarded and the Moedim are unrecognized. If you unrecognize the Ayin Dalet, you can't recognize the witness and testimony of his very true self. You'd rather recognize an amalgamated Saturnalia, Christ Mass, Ishtar, but you won't recognize Sukkot and Pesach and Shavuot, Yom Teruah, Yom Kippur, Shemini Atzeret. What's the matter? You don't know? No one said? Yahuwah said he'd pick us up and carry us the way a man would carry his own son who just couldn't walk. Maybe the terrain's too rough. Maybe the son is tired. He says, I'll carry you, though. The very fact we're here, that's the end of that verse. The next verse, and by this very word, this matter, this debar, without you being struck or beaten, your faithfulness, your Alef Mem Yod Nun Mem, see, that's the word amen, Alef Mem Nun, but it says it's Bet Yod He Vav He, where it could mean with Yahweh, but it's translated against. Quite often you'll see the word with the bet prefix translated with, and quite often against. So this verse of this particular shield here is saying, in spite of everything that just happened in Egypt and for 40 years in the wilderness and all these promises and everything he says, you don't trust him. You're unfaithful to him because you don't believe him. And then the next phrase, the halakha, mode of walking according to your faith, your attitude is contrary to the way the path is instructed. Well, then that's where we make the correction. Let's just do what he said. We can immediately stop and start doing what he said. Stop doing what we've been doing and just do what he said. So they, according to your face, it's like, yeah, hey, I hate that little face, yeah. Smile, that's different. I say, just like, boop, the face in the mirror changes. How do I change my attitude about what he said? Hey, I want bacon on my cheeseburger. No, no bacon. No more pork loin roast. Okay. No more chicken sausage wrapped in pork skins. Okay. Okay. Smile. Really? You'd rather risk burning in hell for not being his people than give up eating pork? And I didn't say eating pork's going to send you to hell, but if you're not his people and you're not getting in, what does that mean? Why would you do that? Anyway, time for a break.